Hello and welcome to You Are Medicine, a podcast that reaffirms your innate healing wisdom and capacities. I'm your host, Thuy Nguyen. In today's podcast, I speak with Dr. Sabine Wilms, PhD, writer, publisher, translator, and teacher. Sabine runs the world's only rigorous intensive training program on classical Chinese language for practitioners of Chinese medicine, and I am so lucky to be one of her students. Sabine comes from a family of doctors and initially chose to walk a different path through studying Chinese philosophy and language, but as fate would have it, the journey led her back to healing. I've been Sabine's student for a couple of grueling and hardcore months of classical Chinese language learning, grueling to a 50-something-year-old brain with no Chinese language background. But Sabine has taken a subject so seemingly insurmountable and is making it, in a word, fun. There's something about Sabine, warm, down-to-earth, quirky, and encouraging, like the favorite aunt, that gives this whole rigorous and academic endeavor a different flavor. Every week, 15 students around the world zoom into her living space on Whidbey Island off the northwestern coast, and there she is in front of an overflowing bookshelf of translations, philosophy, academia, history, medicine, and more. You can tell by the energy and knowledge that she speaks on the subject that this is her jam, not just language or medicine or Chinese philosophy, but all of it and how it pertains to life itself. It's not uncommon for her to connect what is being discussed to seemingly tangential thoughts and stories, but they're not tangents at all because they reinforce for me the application and purpose of why I am studying classical Chinese to begin with. Not for the purpose of knowing something, but for the purpose of doing something. During one of these tangents, she said something that really touched me, and the respect that I already held for her deepened. She said that a part of her path is to preserve and protect the ancient Chinese idea of what it means to be a healer. What does it mean to be a healer? I've been chewing on this one since I started studying Chinese medicine 25 some odd years ago, and my understanding of it continues to change and grow. When Sabine said this thing, I knew I wanted to invite her into a conversation about what a healer is. Part of your work, your life work, is this effort to preserve, I think you used the word, or maybe defend or protect this idea of what a healer is. Do you remember that?
Of course not. I say things all day long. People are like, oh, remember? No.
I don't remember what context we were talking in, but you made a very strong statement about that. And I thought, wow, nobody says that and nobody does that.
And I wonder, I think maybe my people who I talk to all day long, like 90% of my students, are practitioners of some sort, acupuncturists. Yeah, you're practitioners. And I am not, in that narrow sense of I don't treat sick people. So, and I come from a family of all my relatives in Germany, they're all doctors. And I turned my back to that when I was 18. I rejected like my whole heritage, my whole family is like, no, just I'm going to do my own thing. And then I did Chinese studies and somehow I came back into the medicine, but I don't treat sick people. So because of that, maybe I have the luxury to think about it with more detachment.
Maybe. I don't know if you treat sick people like that, but I do think that you are a healer and maybe you treat practitioners in what you do. I definitely see you as being a practitioner in a healer sense. But yeah, you don't go to clinic and put needles in people.
I'm not a licensed practitioner, right? So to me, I guess my central question is just how can I show up as a force of goodness in the world?
I guess that goes back to defining what a practitioner is. And from my understanding, and you can, help me out with this understanding, but the role of a practitioner in ancient Chinese times, it was thought that the more sophisticated or the more superior, I don't know what the word is, the better practitioner, the less tools are actually used. You know, you're guiding people on how to live in harmony with nature, with food, with eating. And if you're not a great practitioner in that way, then you have to use the needles, right?
Yeah, yeah. The more subtle you can be, and the idea of treating disease before it arises.
So then you are actually a superior practitioner, Sabine, because you're tuning into the very subtle elements of what Chinese medicine is. And you're reminding practitioners of the subtle elements. That's how I see it. And you embody and cultivate it in your own life. So you definitely have more relationship to the teachings of the seasons and the relationship to Mother Nature through how you live and your embodiment of it. And by extension, what you're contributing to the profession in tuning in the subtle realm, you're not just a practitioner, you are by definition one of the more sublime practitioners.
No. But I mean, I must, and it was a total coincidence that I ended up being a goat farmer because I had just bought my farm in New Mexico and got laid off. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? I got to make a living outside of Taos in a rural community with a PhD in medical anthropology and East Asian studies. All right, I got 20 apple trees and a herd of goats. I better get good at making goat cheese.
But this is the
so it was not
knowledge. You have an embodied knowledge that feels very important.
And it is relevant, absolutely, because we're talking about a medicine that comes from a time and a culture that was agricultural, where we did have, and really, you know, is it even right to juxtapose or contrast Western medicine with Chinese medicine? Or is it better to say modern global medicine versus just the traditional way of being in the world and thinking about the world and treating, which is where I would love to
let's
around and have you answer my question on that. That's something that I'm always sitting with.
Yeah, I do think that we can be modern practitioners of traditional medicine. And I think that we can be quote unquote traditional practitioners of modern medicine.
Wait, say that again. That was really good. That was really good.
If we are using the word traditional as in classical, I think that we can be modern practitioners in the way we think. If we have a worldview that presumes separation, which I think most of us in the modern world does, we can be modern practitioners of traditional medicine. But I also believe that there are traditional practitioners of modern medicine, which are people who understand the world in an interconnected way, but use modern tools.
I love that. I completely agree. That was really good.
So what I am in love with in Chinese medicine, for me, is less the tools and more cultivating and embodying an understanding that the world is interconnected. And to me, that itself is the medicine that the world is calling for. So
I totally get it. Yes. And you know, we were talking about, you asked me about what it means to be a healer or to practice medicine, and you brought up the word separation.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's key here in terms of diagnosing what's wrong. That's a really big word. Separation is maybe what a healer is trying to mitigate. But maybe that's what I'm trying to, thinking about what it means to heal in that way that you were just describing. The concept of separation as what ails what makes us ill as individuals, as families, as a society.
Yes. I absolutely feel that way. Separation in many, many ways. Isolation, separation, the notion, the idea in modern medicine of a practitioner, the ability to separate ourselves from what we're studying or what we're seeing and diagnosing as a separate thing, that's a model that I don't understand. To me, it's not a reality that I experience, you know? And so to me, that way of seeing the world is itself an illness because it doesn't take into consideration what is healing. If separation is illness, then healing is coming back together, is seeing each other mirrored, is a healing that has to happen all together, right?
Yeah.
And as a practitioner, I feel that we have to understand our connection to our patients. We have to understand our own connection to illness, our own relationship to separation. We have to heal that, or at first even understand and see it. The idea of separation is so given and embedded in our modern way of seeing the world that it can be really hard to see it. What does this mean? What is the idea of separation? When I say that, what I mean is that we believe that we exist separately from one another, as well as from anything that is outside of us, and that we are the agents of separate lives. Our modern view is highly individualistic, self-determined, compartmentalized, and controlling. This ability to separate ourselves from the other gives us the illusion of safety and control. We also separate parts of ourselves from inside ourselves. We separate and compartmentalize our emotions from our intellect, from our physicality, as if that's possible. To reinforce this way of seeing, our society has many separate experts for separate compartments of medicine, each zooming in and specializing in that particular field. There can be usefulness to this way of seeing when the expert understands their part in the whole. However, too often the connection to a larger whole is not made, and more separation occurs as individuals within the field create hierarchies to dominate, rather than connections to learn from one another and to grow together. It's especially disheartening within practices whose main aim is purportedly to close these gaps of separation, to heal, and to reaffirm a worldview of connection. Sabine tells me a very relevant story about this.
It was like, okay, so am I a practitioner or not? And I think it was actually my friend Zev Rosenberg who pointed out to me that, you know what, Sabine, you are a practitioner. So I've gone from being apologetic, and I guess what it really started with is that certain practitioners decades ago questioned my right to be part of the conversation of Chinese medicine. And this was one particular practitioner who was a very authoritative figure, and he was a misogynistic jerk, and he presented himself as potentially an embodiment, a reincarnation of Sun Tzu Miao. And it really, there was an arrogance in there that just made me so mad. And he said, but Sun Tzu Miao came from a culture that was misogynistic, patrilineal, patriarchal. And Sun Tzu Miao said that he would rather treat 10 men than one woman, and see how misogynistic traditional China was. They were so barbaric. And here I am. I can teach you Chinese TCM gynecology in a weekend. And then he would sell his courses on TCM gynecology. And it was so offensive to me because this guy had never read Sun Tzu Miao. He didn't know classical Chinese. And he was telling people 20 years ago, most practitioners, they didn't have access to Chinese sources. Like now, the world is so different. There are so many translators working, and people are able to go to China. Practitioners like you have such a better knowledge of the Chinese world that this medicine comes from. But he got away with this 20 years ago. And he supposedly quoted Sun Miao saying, oh, Sun Miao hated women because he said he'd rather treat 10 men than one woman. And my friend Zeph confronted him, and this was a email exchange or something, and said, actually, Sabine Wilms wrote her doctoral dissertation on this, and that's not what she said Sun Miao said. She said that Sun Miao said that women are 10 times more difficult to treat. And that's why we need to pay extra attention to women. And that's why he put the volumes for women's health at the very beginning of his book, because he realized women are more complex because they have reproductive cycles and childbearing, and there's a lot of complications and blah, blah, blah. They're just more complex. And this person responded by saying, Dr. Wilms has no right to be part of the conversation because she's not a practitioner. She's just an academic. So the academics don't know anything about Chinese medicine. So that was his way of just like shoving me in the corner. And I'm like, no. That really made me mad. Don't do that to me. So it was like, am I a practitioner or not? Or what is my right and my role to speak up when I see misrepresentations of Chinese medicine as an anthropologist and historian and translator? And more, I've just embraced my role as, wait a minute, I actually know a whole lot about traditional Chinese medicine. And plus, I'm a middle-aged woman, so you don't.
I love how Sabine ends her explanation of her relevancy with, plus I'm a middle-aged woman. There are so many aspects of our inherent knowledge that is undermined by this system of separation and hierarchy, including the wisdom of who we are. I feel for and can relate to Sabine's outrage, being an Asian woman, not only in this field, but in this society, having to deal with this on the regular. The anger has gotten the best of me in the past, but over time, I realized that my anger was in direct proportion to how much I actually bought into the prevailing system of separation, how much I felt my own sense of worth was dictated by people within that system. When I stopped locating myself within that system, I freed up my energy to establish another way of seeing, a way so different and inclusive that there is actually no possible threat to it. This way of seeing sees everything, without exception, as connected. So even this modern separate way of navigating the world is actually essential and connected to a larger whole. Within this more holistic, inclusive way of understanding the world, there is no good and bad, right or wrong, since everything has their place. There's just how do we bring this together and harmonize and balance? How do we learn from all things, even the things that we find threatening, painful, and challenging, and understand them in a way that naturally puts them in their proper places, and that can lead to more harmony and healing for everyone. It's not that there's anything wrong or bad about the modern system of seeing things in and of itself. It's just that it's incomplete and overblown, as if it were a superior system, thereby establishing a hierarchy that doesn't actually exist except by our agreement with it. And so it's nice to hear that Sabine didn't agree with this practitioner and said, no, wait a minute. What I have to say is absolutely relevant to traditional Chinese medicine, because of my life experiences as a woman, as a mom, as a lover of Chinese philosophical systems, a goat farmer, a medical anthropologist, an academic, a German having lived in Taiwan, a translator, a descendant of healers. That gives me unique capacity to understand and transmit more accurately what Sun Miao meant to say. I honor Sabine's pushback because I know it's not easy. It's not just a pushback toward an individual. It's a pushback toward social conditioning, lifetimes of conditioning, actually. And that refusal to just go along with the dominant system not only gives fresh perspective in the present moment, but also gives insight into a deeper, wider narrative of the profundity of traditional Chinese medicine and relocates it outside of the separate, hierarchical, patriarchal, and racist lens that it too often gets filtered through. From that larger perspective, we can better understand things from a multitude of perspectives, using the ancient Chinese concept of yin-yang as a guide to finding harmony and balance in both health as well as in society.
To me, it's all about harmony and balance. Looking at the world in terms of yin and yang is just such a gift from traditional Chinese culture. It's not just medicine, right? It's science, it's cosmology, it's philosophy, it's gender relations, it's summer, winter. I find that there's a lot in that world of traditional Chinese medicine and philosophy and science that helps me make sense of the current moment. I used to have a goat farm. Like in the pandemic, I just make scones or goat cheese, and I go around and give out goat cheese to my neighbors. Like, right? We do little acts of kindness. And that's what I told my daughter, who got really depressed, and she's an activist, and she wants to do these big dramatic things, and then she got really burnt out because she worked with incarcerated people, and I wouldn't have the heart to do what she did, and witnessing and processing the suffering. She worked in a Syrian refugee camp in Greece when she was 21 or something, and then she gets burnt out.
Yeah.
And I know I don't have the heart to be in the middle of a war zone or to help in that way, because I'm just way too sensitive. So what can I do in my own very, very privileged life that I have here in my peaceful world with my loving dog and my goats and my cat? How can I be a meaningful presence?
I think as you're talking and kind of saying you want to be a force for good, and the idea of preserving that role as a healer, I think most people who are healers, we all feel that way, even within the sort of right and wrong. Everybody kind of feels like they're on the right side.
Uh-huh.
Right? And I think that when you made that statement, it kind of pointed to something underlying, and maybe that's the harmony piece. What does showing up for good look like?
Yeah.
Is it part of identifying what's bad, like yin and yang, or is it something deeper and more that ties into your understanding of the healer, capital H, something like that?
And medicine, capital M, medicine. A lot of people in Chinese medicine, they put down biomedical practitioners. But I come from a family and they're all doctors, and they're just as compassionate. And we all want to make capital M medicine.
Yes. And so I guess when you made that distinction, and it really touched me, because you were kind of saying without saying that there is some notion of healer with a capital H that needs to be preserved and defended.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about that notion as opposed to, we're all healers or doctors or however we identify, but there is a sort of ultimate notion that feels like it's needed to be preserved. And what distinguishes that?
And I love the fact that you picked up on that. You're very, what's the word? Yeah, you're very deep. Like, I love the fact that you're like, okay, let's dig deeper. You're like a dog looking for the bone. I love that. And I don't know. I just say these things. But I love the fact that, just asking that question. And I think I kind of see it as my role to remind you guys that what you as Chinese medicine practitioners, that the tradition that you have chosen to practice in, offers a vision of the role of the healer and the role of medicine and diagnosis and treatment that is so much bigger than an illness, right? The character, I don't know if we did this in the class already, if we covered this, but the Chinese word 治病, to treat illness. The character Bing also means disorder. It means things that are out of whack. And treat has the water radical. It's about managing the waterways. So that expression, it doesn't just mean to treat illness, but it's also what the ruler does. And it's what a philosopher, a sage does. And you as a practitioner in this tradition,
Yes.
I like to see my role as reminding Western practitioners of Chinese medicine that the tradition that you are practicing in has such a bigger, more rounder, holistic, and very powerful vision of what it means to be a healer and a practitioner, what it means to treat, because you're not just treating the body, you're treating the spirit, you're treating the cosmos, you are treating society. Like when you look at when somebody walks into your clinic and you get them on your table and you are not just sticking needles into them, you're not just giving them herbs. If you're diagnosing in the tradition of Chinese medicine, you are looking at climate change, you're looking at unhealthy diet, you're looking at dysfunctional job pressures, like women being pushed back to go back to work far too soon after they've had babies, not respecting the reproductive cycles of women, all of these things that make us sick. What is causing suffering is not a virus, or what is causing insomnia or neck pain is ultimately it's stress, it's the systemic violence, it's colonialism, I could go on and on and go on. And I think that Chinese medicine is really a tool for liberation. It's got this grand vision. It can be so many things for harmonizing gender relations, heaven and earth, our relationship with animals and plants. There's just so much more.
Yes. And
is that the right direction? Is that where you kind of go?
Yeah, this is what I was sniffing out. This is kind of like what I really wanted to talk with you about, this bigger vision of Chinese medicine, because I think what has happened is that we've taken the tools of Chinese medicine, the acupuncture, when we talk about Chinese medicine, that's what people think of, the needles and the cups or whatever. And we've put it through a different worldview. We put it through the Western, modern, another lens. And that's how most of us think about what Chinese medicine is. But I think that what you're saying is that you're reminding us that the role of the healer is very different in the correct worldview from which Chinese medicine came about. Is that correct?
Yeah. That we don't want to just use the tools. We don't want to just take the needles or the herbs, but stay in the paradigm of Western medicine. I'm trying to remind you all that the tools come as part of a broader paradigm of being in the world.
Yes.
I think Sun Miao, being in these images, being the semi-divine god of divinity of medicine, between heaven and earth with the tiger and the dragon. Like,
yes,
there's more to Sun Miao than his formulas.
Sun Miao is a 7th century Chinese healer known as China's King of Medicine. He is celebrated for his significant contributions to Chinese medicine, writing 2 main opus on herbal remedies, inner alchemy, self-cultivation, and care for patients. He is known for the text on the absolute sincerity of great physicians, often called the Chinese Hippocratic Oath, an oath that Chinese medical practitioners are expected to observe. Sabine's translation of a portion of that oath reads as follows, quote, "Under all circumstances, when you treat disease as a great doctor, you must calm your spirit and nail down your will. You must be free of wants and desires, and you must first develop a heart full of great loving kindness and empathy. You must vow to desire to rescue all sentient beings indiscriminately from their suffering." End quote. I spoke to Sabine about Sensi Miao. When I read Sensi Miao, it seems to me that he's just talking about you have to become enlightened or something. And that is part of coming together as one, what he's talking about,
Yes. And at the same time, I mean, volume 27 that I started translating in the middle of the pandemic and then had to shelf because of many reasons. And I just can't get back to it. And maybe there's a reason for it. I've just kind of made peace with that right now. It's the volume on immortality, longevity, on Yangsheng, nurturing life, health cultivation, as opposed to treating illness. It's almost the last volume in his book. So it's his grand conclusion. And it's called Yangxing. It's nurturing your innate nature as opposed to nurturing life. And what he talks about in there as the foundation of longevity, health, whatever, of thriving, part of it is enlightenment, but part of it is also just cultivating as a daily practice, those small virtuous actions. So it's the Taoist, the Buddhist, and the Confucian thing all together, which is why I love Sun Miao, because that's the early Tang dynasty, that period in the 7th century, when it wasn't that the Taoists were fighting the Buddhists, were fighting the Confucians. And there was no division between this is Chinese and this is barbarian. It was a time when China was really open to foreign influences. And it was just this really fertile, beautiful time of flourishing of poetry and art and music and everything. I don't know, maybe I'm idealizing it, but I like to stick my head in there and live in that world.
Like a synthesis of everything, of all the influences. And I guess that last volume, you're saying that he was talking about just a daily cultivation of sort of virtuous things, or of actual exercise or diet, or
all of it, like sleep hygiene, regularity, moderation. Don't overtax your body. Don't laugh too much. Don't sleep too much. Don't eat too much. They're different chapters and they're quotations from other texts, but a lot of it is things like don't sleep under the ridge beam. And I just moved my bedroom. I mean, I have a tiny house, so this is actually really, really complicated because I moved my bedroom into this space where I have a queen size mattress and it doesn't fit into that space because it's so tiny. But I'm no longer sleeping in the sleeping loft under the ridge beam because it's not healthy. And talk about reading Sun Miao and really feeling it. For whatever reason, I finally got it. I'm like, yeah, I'm sleeping under the ridge beam. And here I am translating this. And
did you notice the difference?
Oh, yeah, completely. I'm a completely different person. I'm sleeping on the floor and I'm not under this ridge beam. And part of it was last year, I had a tree come down and crack my ridge beam, like literally. So there's something about where sleeping under the pinnacle of the roof of the house is energetically, I mean, yeah, I know I'm weird.
Interesting.
I mean, it's these weird things in this chapter. And it talks about diet, of course. It talks about things like picking the perfect pine resin from trees that are found on the yin side of a specific mountain range in a specific area where there's these ancient pine trees, and you pick the resin and that's what you use in the formulas, or the special water from this area. Or so there's recipes for immortality, there's alchemical stuff in it, there's very, very basic everyday actions of doing good deeds, of being a good human in the world. And then there's Taoian exercises, like what we would call Qigong, the ancient versions of that. So it's this really interesting combination of practices.
Yes, yes. I think as a practitioner, when I think about those things, I'm always trying to figure out how to make things accessible and relevant and easy in giving patients advice about how to be well in the modern world, you know.
Right.
But if you had some overall sense, an underlying sense of what Sun Si Miao was moving from that we can translate into modern practice that might be helpful for people to just be sensitive to in terms of diet or, you know, even feng shui, I guess we could say the ridge beam thing, because it seems all those things feel very particular to his time and era and how he was living. And how can you translate that into helping support people in their day-to-day life these days?
That's your job. I'm just a translator.
Yes, that is my job. It is actually something that I think about all the time. How do I translate the wisdom of foreign lands and ancient times to modern everyday people? For me, the whole point of translation is to communicate a message effectively and in a meaningful way. Why am I studying classical Chinese language? And what is the message that I'm hoping to communicate? Does it have to do with finding instructions and techniques like sleep here, exercise like this, or eat that? Or does it have to do with something else? When I think about it, it's clear to me that the hope for secret practices or formulas isn't the reason why I'm embarking on this journey. Ironically, I'm studying a language considered by some to be a dead language in order to discover a timeless wisdom that is meant to be translatable, not just in language, but also in practice, to all times and all places. In fact, I think not just my studies in classical Chinese, but so much of my work is a search for and sharing of that. I talked to Sabine about this journey in my current work with the Navajo Healing Project. And there's something about how Chinese medicine is so heavily embedded in the knowledge of nature and the cosmos that I think I learned from being there and working with people who share knowledge with me in that way, you know. And it's, you know, like when you were talking about Sun Si Miao goes to the yin side of the mountain and get this resin, and that's how they do medicine out there. And it's because there is a connection to understanding why.
Mm-hmm.
Why there? Why that? It took me a long time. It's still, I mean, I'm still learning what that relationship is about, what that knowledge is about. And it is about overcoming this sense of separation from the things that we are naturally connected to, but the trauma of forgetting that, you know. So I think that it's played such a central role in my own healing that I have to experience that healing to understand what healing is, medicine is, to be a better practitioner. And I think for me, for my life path, for some reason, I ended up working with the innate community and partaking in that traditional medicine that has had a profound effect on me and has helped transmit it to my practicing Chinese medicine, believe it or not. So
No, absolutely. I can totally, this makes so much sense to me, how that experience helps you tap into an aspect of Chinese medicine that is just not accessible when you have never experienced a different way of being in the land with the spirits, with your relations. I think at some point it's wrong for us to talk about Western culture versus Chinese culture.
right.
And I wonder at some point it's just post-industrial or modernized versus most of us. Like, I wonder what my grandparents, 2, 3 generations ago, I wonder what they would have said. And then I wonder how much of the European experience comes from the fact that there was constant warfare. And I'm not a historian of European wars or anything, but Well, there was warfare everywhere in the world. So no, that's like, it's so easy to come to these, to draw these conclusions, these general statements. And then I'm like, no. I mean, humans have always been at war everywhere.
I wonder how much I'm romanticizing traditional, I don't know, and demonizing modern. During COVID, when a lot of the knowledge keepers in Dineta, a lot of the Navajo people, they were passing away.
Yeah.
And I felt really distressed.
Yeah.
And I remember I was asking my mentor there, I said, this is like knowledge that's going to be gone. And I asked him, I said, what's going to happen? What, so distressed. And he said, don't worry, wisdom can't die. Nature doesn't die. Wisdom doesn't die. And I think about that a lot. I hold on to that because traditional or modern or whatever, I think we're all searching for that. And we have to believe and feel that. That's the work. That's the healing work.
Right. It is. I mean, I feel like during the pandemic and with global warming and everything, I bury my head in the Chinese texts, and it is all, the fundamental nature of everything is change. And then in combination with the Buddhist perspective on these eons of worlds just blowing up and all these different lifetimes and all these different levels of experience, it kind of takes the edge off a little bit for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but it also explains, it's like the traditional versus the modern is still within this changeful world, because what's today going to be modern is traditional somewhere along. We're still in this changeful world, but I think that what he was reminding me of is like, hold strong to the changeless, the wisdom, the what is under nature. It's beautiful. And I think when I get into these conversations, it's a way of reminding myself to do that, Hold on to the changeless. What is the changeless? We live in a world of time and change, a world of changing seasons, aging bodies, illness and wellness, night and day, peace and turmoil. Regardless of what things are now, they are forever changing. And in that constant change, we are seeking balance and harmony on personal levels as well as larger levels.
I think that's where maybe the language of yin and yang is so powerful. Because, yeah, you can use it as a highly technical diagnostic tool, right? When you're thinking about the very basic diagnosis, is this person more of a yin? Do they have a tendency towards yin or towards yang? Do you recommend cooling or warming substances? Are they more likely to be affected by yin or by yang? Do they have an overactivity or underactivity? All of these things.
Yes.
And to me, I paid attention to yin for a year. I had a blog about the transformative power of yin because I had a dream. And in that dream, I had my friend Lillian Bridges and my other friend Brenda Hood sit on a couch, and they were discussing inner alchemy and yin and yang. And it was very powerful. So I called them up and I said, we have to do a retreat. And we did that retreat the fall before COVID happened. And then Lillian died, Wow, we did that retreat just about a year before she died. And it was a really hard time for her, and it was a hard time for Brenda. And I wasn't sure either of them were going to show up until like a week before the retreat. It was like, and I'd never organized a retreat completely by myself in that way. So I was completely out of my comfort zone, and it was super intense. But I just felt like I had this dream. I had to make this happen. And I haven't been able to do it since, but the conversation has to continue about the power of yin. So I spent a year getting ready for this retreat. So I spent a year doing a daily practice where I would take a picture or find a passage in whatever I was reading, or I would have a dream or wake up in the morning or late at night, think about what is the power of yin? Because I feel like we live in a culture that is very yang centered, whether it's youth over old age or productivity. We live in a culture that celebrates hard work and pushing yourself and an outcome and productivity or loudness, right? On social media. If you want to be successful, we define success by being out there, being young, and summer over winter in all these ways, and male over female to a certain extent. But I think that we can see with global warming, with all these wars, it's everywhere, if you know where to look, that our culture is out of whack. And part of that is that separation of yin and yang. Even in Chinese medicine, people love to talk about heaven. And I mean, maybe it's just that I was teaching at a college that was more classically oriented, so it attracted more esoteric people maybe, but it was all about, people love talking about treating the spirit as opposed to grounding into the earth and treating chi versus treating blood. Do you know where I'm going with this? Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
I love that you're talking about this. And, you know, I'm teaching Dene interns Chinese medicine. And actually, this was the topic of my last teaching with them. Was I was trying to explain to them the nature of, just like you in teaching, I have to kind of figure out what is important to impart, especially to people that they're not practitioners. They're starting off with kind of zero. And so what can I teach that's safe? What type of medicine to teach that is safe, and how to use it? And I was telling them that medicine in America, or modern medicine, is very young. It's all very aggressive, all about how do you do something, make something happen. How do you, take disease away, or how do you force the body to do this or that? It's a very strong medicine. And that strong medicine has its place, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And we can also think about Chinese medicine if we're talking about yin and yang in this way, and you can have a yang approach to medicine, just like in martial arts. There's yang martial arts, right? Where you're like kicking and you're young and you're all your energy. And then there's yin martial arts, where you're really cultivating something different and inside, a sort of internal power. So I was telling them that I'm teaching them a yin form of medicine, and what that means. It means to show up and listen. It means to not be after that aggressive outcome, that the tools that I'm teaching them feel more subtle, but can be quite powerful. But to learn yin medicine, you have to cultivate yinness, which means you have to tune into the more subtle. You have to learn to listen before you do something. You can't jump to conclusions. And it was a conversation that I think was very useful in also cultivating patience in them, in how they're learning the medicine and the slowness of it, but also the power of it once you get that. And it was a very pivotal conversation because, when you go into a culture where there's been so much damage done, so much pain and suffering done, the instinct as a healer is to give yang treatment, to give a strong treatment, to take all that away, and you see people and you want to just throw all the acupuncture or cupping, and you're not going to see them for a long time, to somehow counteract that. And it's not possible, right? But it's kind of the way we're trained to respond, to deal with things in a very modern context of what medicine is. Medicine is very young. Medicine is very aggressive. And to just rethink of medicine in a more yin way, I think about what you're talking about all the time, especially in my own practice, like what is yin medicine versus yang medicine. And I see it akin as to yin martial arts versus yang martial arts.
You're getting me You're getting me teary-eyed.
Oh.
Going. This is like balm for my soul.
Oh.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And just creating space for this conversation, for these kinds of questions.
Yes.
To me, that's the beauty of that tradition. And that's the piece of Chinese medicine that I love so much, that I don't want our yang way. And it's not one is better than the other. It's because to me, that's a yang way, like this judgment. It's just yang is so loud, right? Yin is non-being and it's non-speaking and it's being silent and it's just being, everything is being overtaken by this yang way, including this Chinese medicine. And
Yes.
what you're just saying is, yeah.
And yin, it's not better, but it's actually what is needed now to create a harmony, because it's out of balance now with the yang, you know? And I think that it makes sense to me why modern medicine is the way it is. It's because in a worldview where things are very separate and we're not taught to feel things until it's really bad, until we're really hurt, then we're going to need the big guns for medicine. If that's the world that we've agreed to, then modern medicine makes absolute sense.
Yes.
It's a harsh
Oh,
world.
you're brilliant. You are so on your golden path.
Oh my gosh.
You are.
But, it's a harsh world, and I think we've all agreed to it thinking it's the only world. And I think that that's why what you're doing is so important, because it is not the only world.
Can we imagine a world where medicine isn't just going to a scary yet necessary sterilized someplace, where the appointed expert of the well-being of our very own bodies is an expert that can wield life and death instruments upon us? Is there a world that will take serious, not to mention honor, our innate wisdom to take care of ourselves and one another, that recognizes grandma's chicken soup or our neighbor's kind gestures or warm baths and naps, or a friend that listens, that holds important, so many crucial and much more accessible everyday things as essential to our well-being, recognizes these things without patronizing them? And in that recognition, can we return to the basics of being a human being, relearn what it means to take care of ourselves and one another? Can we imagine that world? Well, you don't have to just imagine that world. It's the world you live in concurrent with the other world, where we're coerced through fear to give away our knowledge and our mutual care for one another to a system that purports to offer superior care, but that too often and too drastically falls short. It's not an either-or choice. We live in both worlds to varying degrees. It's just my aim, or golden path as Sabine puts it, to encourage you to put more attention and cultivation to the world of deep, humble medicine, yin medicine, if you will, to take care of yourself and your people and this earth in the smallest of ways. That is big medicine, and it is the medicine needed for now.
I think that's part of what I want to cultivate as a healing presence.
You are that. I mean, yeah.
Which a lot of times
I feel like I'm trying to convince you that you're a wonderful practitioner with a healing power. It feels very true to me. And I think that part of the work that I feel compelled to do is to also communicate that healing is beyond the tools and is actually a way that we all have access to. and is a way, it's my empowering my patients to understand healing beyond going to the clinic and getting needles. And that, even these shows that I produce, I feel like they're medicine. And
Yeah.
what you do is medicine. And I think we all should know that we shouldn't think about medicine so categorically in this weird way that we've been taught to think about it. And because we think about it that way, it's created this world of separation and power and all that. So part of it is me just kind of nudging.
I think that's a really important message.
Yeah.
And I put myself through college playing street music in Japan. And I felt like that was medicine. That was putting out, creating a little force field of beauty and happiness in the middle of Ikebukuro at the subway station by the ticket machines. And
absolutely. And who knows how many lives you've saved doing that? We don't really know what we're doing, but I think that the intention, like you were saying, an intention of healing and intention of a good force is all we can do, Then if we have that, then so much can be medicine, right?
That's we're getting there. We're getting there. Yes. I think you're absolutely right.
I hope this program has been medicine for all of you. And I hope in listening to this, you discover the healer in you and share your medicine with others. And in doing so, I wish healing for all of us, all of the world, in all of the ways. True healing has to include everyone. A big thank you to my dear teacher, Sabine Wilms, for taking time out from her very busy life to share in this conversation with me. To learn more about Sabine's work and to purchase her translations, you can go to happygoatproductions.com. To learn more about the Navajo Healing Project, you can go to navajohealingproject.com. Thank you all for listening to another episode of You Are Medicine. Please share our podcast with your friends and family. This is Thuy, and until next time, please take good care of yourself and your loved ones.